This episode is brought to you by Farmers Insurance.
Breaking news this hour, the head of a prominent monastery in Kiev is taken before a court. That's as a clampdown on religious figures with traditional ties to Russia intensifies. Also ahead on the program.
The US and its allies, they want to do everything in their power to preserve their privileged position in the world.
Following a Security Council meeting at the UN, Russia's deputy ambassador to the organization tells RT Western powers have an insatiable drive to maintain their global hegemony. India's flagship airline insists it will continue flights over Russian airspace despite pressure from Western partners. And a new report claims the Central African Republic is in a dire situation as near half the population faces food. Midday in Bogota.
No contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Some things just make you feel more alive than others. Like the rush of adrenaline from an SUV that roars from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. Jaguar delivers that thrill every day. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes an SUV.
Will Turkey ratify Sweden's NATO membership? Stockholm says it can't fulfill all Ankara's demands. As the bloc's membership requires unanimous approval, what would make Turkey change its mind? And what does all of this mean for NATO's future? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. One of the many fallouts of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been that previously neutral Nordic countries
in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice slow transmission here, and it's a really nice manual. It's the Tremec TR6060, and so very good shifts. And I actually started out this day on the track in these, both the manual and the auto, and they feel fantastic on the track. I'll elaborate more in a little bit, but man, these things are wild on track. And on the street here, you still can appreciate it has the automatic rev matching, and it also has no lift shift, which obviously, you know, are more helpful whenever you're on the track. But here on the street, it's also great to have that, especially the rev matching, so you don't have to be, you know, heel toeing whenever you're coming up the red lights and stuff. It's really great. So other things here, you know, it's the same kind of setup as any other CT5. So as far as visibility goes, you know, you still have really good visibility forward, good view out of the side. So you have these little narrow side mirrors, but you know, totally easy to get used to, and I think they look really cool, so it's worth a little bit of a sacrifice of not having an enormous mirror. And the view out of the back is also good too. So, you know, it's very easy to daily drive. And another thing to note about the manual here is the clutch throw is pretty natural feeling, and I mean, you know, the first few times you might take a little bit of getting used to, but once you're used to it, it's very easy to be smooth with. It's not overly heavy or anything, which is really impressive considering we're dealing with a clutch that has to deal with, you know, almost 700 horsepower. It's, you know, pretty great that it's not, you know, super heavy. You're not having to do a leg workout just to move the clutch. But otherwise, so I'm just in the normal tour mode right now. So the exhaust is in its quietest setting. Everything's, you know, nice and relaxed. And it's a really great cruiser, you know, again, for just the normal ho-hum, daily driving kind of stuff. You know, obviously it feels like an event in this vehicle because you have a manual and you still have a V8 soundtrack. You can hear pretty good even, you know, with the exhaust in its quiet setting. But you have magnetic ride control 4.0, so it's the newest evolution of magnetic ride control. And in tour mode here, it really does a good job of soaking up bumps. Now, I'm not having any kind of aggressive potholes. These roads are fairly well taken care of, although there's some little grooves in them and stuff here. I also love the shifter and just how precise it is too. It's very easy to find all the gears. I did notice it was tricky to find fifth whenever you're parked, but I can tell you that when you're at speed, getting into fifth gear is very easy. I was going on the one back straight there, going into fifth at full throttle, and I hit it every single time. Never missed a shift in this thing with my half day of track driving. It did a great job there. So I'm very precise and nicely weighted transmission. Feels really substantial too. It's not some little toy shifter. It's a real good mechanical heavy feeling shifter, but not overboard with the heaviness or anything. But even in tour mode, it has a nice growl to this engine, of course. I mean, it's hard to hide, 6.2 liter supercharged V8. But, one thing I was looking for is with the exhaust in its quietest setting, trying to hear any kind of supercharger whine here. And it doesn't seem like there's much. So we're going to go up into fifth here.
Let's add the extra bass.
You hear a tiny bit. It's a tiny bit more than you get in a GT500, but it's still a far cry from the insane supercharger whine you get in Hellcats and things like that, which I personally love. So if it were me, I would like to hear more supercharger noise, but I'm not going to complain. I'm still hearing a sweet V8 soundtrack behind me. Another thing I really love is I haven't played around with the power too much. I'll do an acceleration here in a minute, and I'll do another one in an automatic later. But one thing I really love is even in fifth gear, cruising at like 2,200 RPMs and just punching it, it still takes off fairly nicely, even in fifth. I mean, obviously we're dealing with a ton of horsepower here, but still, I mean, a lot of other vehicles that are still big horsepower, they have really tall gearing, and it kind of kills some of the fun and actually makes the automatic versions usually a little bit more exciting because you have those gears more closely spaced together. But in this, the gears seem to be fairly close. Again, I will test that out some more here throughout the course of my afternoon of driving. But yeah, I mean, as you can hear, the rev match works flawlessly every time. But I'm going to put it into the V mode here, so everything's turned up to its more aggressive settings, including the exhaust. And yeah, let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does in the manual. Here we go. This thing, it's so fast. Oh, and it is so visceral too with the manual. I mean, you really can bang through those shifts, and again, you don't even have to lift if you're full throttle and you're close to the red line. You can just leave your right foot planted and just bang through those gears. And this thing pulls so strongly. Even that was, this is third gear here at 3,500 RPMs. Still lifts up the front nose, even in the stiffer suspension mode here. And it just accelerates with anger. And oh, it feels good. So the Blackwing CT5V here runs the 6.2 liter supercharged V8 engine. It's hand built. It even has the assembler's signature there on the top of it. And anyway, it does 668 horsepower now, 659 pound-feet of torque, and so that's beyond what you got in previous LT4 iterations, and that's because they revised the intake, the exhaust, did a bunch of tuning changes, of course, things like that. They also did some changes to the supercharger in order to bump that power up a little bit as well. And it's very impressive performance. 0 to 60 is 3.4 seconds for the automatic. Here in the manual, it's 3.6 seconds. You also have launch control and line lock. So they do recognize a lot of people drag race these as well. It's not just about track handling. And so you can have that line lock set up and ready to go, your launch control, all that kind of stuff. And you can even dial in how much slip you want in addition to just what RPM you want to launch at. And yeah, it's all very, very clever. Some other straight line specs here of the Blackwing are that after you do that crazy 0 to 60 time, you can do the quarter mile in 11.3 seconds at 129 miles per hour. And it has a top speed of over 200, they say. They didn't say exactly what over 200, but it is a 200 mile per hour capable car. And that's part of the reason why the CT4V Blackwing actually has more aggressive aero and has, the dive planes in the front that you can get and all that kind of stuff, because that car wasn't focused on the top speed, even though that one will still do 189. But this one, they wanted to make sure it was a 200 mile per hour car, and so that's why the aero isn't quite as aggressive on this, but it still is, of course, very aggressive and, did a totally good job. You have a lot of underbody panels as well, so even if it doesn't obviously, shout at you like this thing has crazy aero, underneath there's a lot of complicated stuff going to work there with the aerodynamics. I mean, they spent so many hundreds of hours in the wind tunnels with these things, testing them and perfecting all that stuff. 225 wide Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires in the back there, 275 in the front, so plenty of front end grip. I found that out on the track. I mean, this thing handled so well, and we don't have very aggressive corners here to really test out the handling here in this rural part of North Carolina. But you know, on the track, it was really impressive. Now, I did the Cadillac V Performance Academy a few years back, so I have a decent amount of seat time in the ATS-V and the CTS-Vs on track, being pushed with instructors and doing 2 days of track driving in those. And so I feel like I have a pretty good handle on how a CTS-V felt on track. And this, I was really shocked at just how much better this is. It is really impressive how it feels more eager to dive into corners. You have more front end grip. You have better power delivery there in the back. It really puts down the power better. The CTS-V, I felt like I was kind of managing the tail a lot more, and it was wagging around a little bit more. I also feel like it felt a little bit like there was a little bit more weight to it, even though the curb weight, by the way, on these is identical to before. It's 1 pound heavier for the CT5 over the CTS. So these with the manual are 4,123 pounds. I believe you add about 30 pounds for the automatic. So still pretty respectable amounts of weight considering what you're dealing with here. Not only the supercharged V8 engine, but also all the cooling. That's a lot of extra weight there. But even with all those enhancements, they continue to basically gain no weight over the CTS-V. But this just feels lighter, even though it isn't lighter. It just feels lighter. It feels more responsive on track, and I just felt like I had a lot more confidence. But I was driving on different tracks, so it wasn't like a direct back-to-back experience with this in the CTS-V. But I just noticed that it was, from my memory of the CTS-V, this was a real big leg up over that, and I was very impressed. CTS-V isn't bad on track, but this is a whole nother league, in my opinion. It really is a huge change, and I was very impressed with the handling there. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff this has going on to maximize the handling. You have electronic limited slip differential, like I said, the magnetic ride control 4.0. You also have advanced PTM settings. The braking is also spectacular here in the Blackwing CT5. So you have 6-piston front Brembos, 4-piston rear. You can get optional carbon ceramic brakes, and if you get the carbon ceramics, they're 400mm diameter discs for those brakes. I mean, massive brakes. They really fill up the wheel wells here on these 19-inch wheels, and it's impressive braking capability. And I mean, I did a half day of track driving. I did like 3 laps when you come in, so it's not like I was doing extended lapping or anything like that. But later on in the morning, I mean, as we continue to go on and on, there was no fade, and all the cars had the carbon ceramics on the track. So I can't really speak for the normal steel rotors, but they're actually not much smaller for the steel rotors. It's only a few millimeters smaller, so I'm sure there's not really much compromise there. It just comes down to preference as far as what you want. You can, of course, now with the V modes here or the My mode, you can dial in exactly how you want the brake feel to even be. So as far as how much pedal travel and the responsiveness of the brake, you can custom tailor that now just with the software, which is super cool too. Do another acceleration because it's too much fun not to. Let's see, even it wanted to wag the tail there, even just in first. Just on the street here, this thing is so insanely fast, and I'm really glad that the gearing is nice and short. You don't have these super tall gears in the manual like you do with some other vehicles. The automatic definitely feels a little bit faster, but this manual, it still is really exciting. It still feels so fast. It's just such a more visceral experience with the manual. You're actually working for the speed, a little bit more, and it just feels so good. Also, I really like this exhaust. So now that we're in the V mode, it's opened up all the way. You can hear there's some burbling and crackling when you let off the gas, and it sounds really good. Going to third, second. Listen to the way this sounds with just the windows down. It's like endless crackles and pops after you let off. It sounds so good. So even when you're driving slow, you can just enjoy this, especially with the windows down. You can hear it even more. And it's great. But it's not overkill. It doesn't drone or anything. The actually use active noise cancellation to kind of get rid of some of the unwanted sounds you probably wouldn't like, you know, any kind of boominess or anything. It gets rid of that kind of stuff. And there is some speaker enhancement as well that goes on to isolate, but they say there's actually a microphone that picks up the good sounds and augments those with the speakers. So you're still hearing real noise, it's just that it's coming, you know, a little bit from the speakers, but I mean, you don't need speaker help. This isn't like some artificially sounding vehicle. You have a fantastic engine, fantastic exhaust, and so that stuff just adds to the experience. I'm all for more sound. There's a little corner. I mean, it's still planted. I did a second gear, and you know, punching it coming out of that corner, it just goes. It is very impressive. You know, I think the CTSV definitely felt a little bit more like a blunt instrument. It was still, you know, really good and precise. Again, I am not downplaying the CTSV's capabilities, but this, again, just in every way, I just find myself constantly being like, wow, like it's, especially the first few laps I did, that was before the tires got a little bit greasy later into the day and stuff, but I mean, the amount of grip these tires put down, these Michelins, really blew me away, especially on those first couple of sessions. And then, you know, out on the street here, it still is a very enjoyable experience, even if all you can do is a few quick little pulls. You know, if they're actually trying to keep your license, you can't really push this very much on the streets, but it still is a ton of fun. And even if you're just hearing that burbling whenever you're just cruising around at the speed limit, it still is more of an event, especially with this manual. If you want to add some excitement to your daily drive, go for the manual for sure. And that is another thing is, you know, if you do like the manual, you want to keep it around, and you know, since this is the only vehicle in this segment that offers it, send that message not only to GM but to the world. Order the manual if you're getting one of these, and you know, send that message to all of them, and maybe that will encourage some to bring back manuals just for the next few years before everything gets electrified. But you know, I'm just so glad that, you know, Cadillac decided, like, look, this is going to be our big bang we're going out with for the crazy supercharged manual stuff. Like, we got to have the manual. They insisted on the manual, and thankfully it sounds like the take rate for the manual so far for the early pre-orders is very, very strong, and so I'm hoping that that continues on and people continue to order the manuals. I love how much this thing moves, even in the stiffer suspension mode. I mean, the whole nose lifts up. It is wonderful. I love that kind of drama. The back end can, you know, get a little squirrely. It's all the good things. But anyway, I'm gonna hop in the automatic and we'll see how that feels on the street. All right, so now I'm in the automatic. I'm gonna go ahead and put it into the V mode here. Again, to make everything maximum performance, and I'm gonna start from an absolute stop here, and here we go. There we go. It wanted to actually put the power down, so it didn't just smoke the tires immediately. And you can turn off traction control if you want to just smoke them right away. But whew, yeah, it's still very, very, very impressive. Oh man, yeah, it's you know, the 10-speed automatic transmission, by the way, it's been custom tuned for this vehicle, and very, very responsive. Feels really good. And this automatic is really intelligent too, so it has this performance shift logic that it has, and so if it detects that you're, you know, trying to drive in a sporty manner, it will keep those revs high, and then, you know, once it realizes you're chilling out again, then that will go away, and then it will drop down to normal RPMs even when you are in that V mode. So it's really cool because, you know, a lot of other cars, whenever you have them in their most aggressive setting, you know, they'll be constantly sitting at 4,000 RPMs, and, you know, it's insistent on, you know, giving you those crazy RPMs constantly. I like that this is smart enough to realize, okay, we'll do it for a little while, but then if you're going to go slow, then clearly you're not needing, you know, 4,000 RPMs. So it's really intelligent. A few other intelligent things with this automatic are that whenever you have it, I think in the fully automatic mode, it'll actually shift faster than Porsche PDK in the first 4 years, I believe. I'm not sure if that's the same for the manual, because I believe manual shifting still might be slower, but as far as the automatic goes, I mean, it's very quick, and it's also, it has an advanced algorithm for the transmission, so it's smart enough to figure out how it should deliver shifts to you. So especially when you're on the track, if it senses that a rougher or quicker shift will disrupt the power delivery and your traction, it will actually slow down the shift just for that shift and that situation. And then if it senses that you can have maximum attack and the fastest, you know, shifts possible, then it will go in and do that stuff super, super fast for you. It, you know, can actually also figure out whether it should hold a year longer than normal and all those types of things too. It sounds very intelligent. Even here in tour mode, I mean, it is immediate. You know, the throttle response is so sharp in this car as well. And so, I mean, it's just immediate because you don't have to wait for any kind of turbos or any kind of weird stuff. And this transmission is always ready to go, and it's really impressive. There's some others where there's a little bit of travel before it starts getting the idea of what you're trying to do. This is just like, no, there is no waiting around for this thing. And it's also impressive because, you know, since you do have 10 gears to pick from, how it really will drop down to the most aggressive gear and really throw you back in your seat, even more so than the manual, which is a little more predictable, and it's just like, you hit the gas and it goes, and just, you know, plants you in the back of your seat. This, it plants you in the back of your seat, but it also just does it with the most intense gear possible, so it kind of just makes the experience that much more intense. And yeah, but anyway, we want to hear the exhaust, so I'll leave it in the V mode the rest of the time. Listen to all those crackles. I love it. Anyway, I'm going to try out the manual shifting here, see how it is. Again, everything is in its most aggressive setting. We're down to first. Here we go. Alright. They wanted to hold me back for a second because I was like, you are going to not put the power down well, so it just decided to, you know, rein me in a little bit there. And again, you can turn all that stuff off, but in a vehicle this fast, especially one that isn't mine, I'm not going to be the person that turns everything off and pretends like I'm the stick, because I'm not. So, but yeah, so manual shifts feel really good. You know, I still think it isn't the fastest manual shifts out there or anything, but I think it's still pretty fast. Yeah, there's a slight delay there. I do wish it was more immediate still for the manual shifts, but it's still fun to play with, and that's the bottom line. Is that, you know, if you're doing this just for the fun of it, I mean, it is still really, really quick. And again, it might be doing some of that intelligent logic of, you know, I'm trying to ask for an upshift, but maybe it's like, if I give it to you super fast, then you're going to lose a little bit of traction or something. So maybe that's part of why, you know, it's not always as super fast, even in manual mode, as I would like it to be. Around to the grocery store or something, you know, you kill 5-10 miles, you get that back easily and then some, you know, over a night of charging. And so it's not a big deal, but with this, it just seems strangely slow. Obviously, I could have gone and topped off an Electrify America station and, you know, gotten back to...
That's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
So setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice low dual clutch transmission. It's an 8-speed wet dual clutch here in the Veloster N. And so I do notice that it does have an engagement point still. It's definitely, you know, pretty smooth, and I think it's a little bit smoother than the old dual clutches you get in like a normal Veloster Turbo or something they still are using in other models, but it is of course beefed up here for the ends and has faster shifts and unique gear ratios, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I can still sense a little bit of an engagement point. It's also not the smoothest. I mean, obviously in a vehicle like this, you don't really care about smoothness a whole lot, but it's just, you know, there's been a few times, I've only driven this vehicle about a dozen miles or so far, but I've already wanted to just like do my own manual shifting in this a lot of the time. Turn down onto this back right here and see how it does. Steering immediately gets heavier. All right, NGS, here we go. All right, I wanted to steer itself right off the road there for a second. Wow. All right, this thing, listen to that. Wow. It really, it's kind of fun how whenever it upshifts, it like really punches you in your back whenever it upshifts. It's really, really impressive. Man, this thing's a little rocket. Oh man, it's even faster than the manual transmission version, but whew, this thing gets up and moves. This thing, oh, it wants to boogie. It's great. And that NGS is really cool to get that extra little overboost. So, the Veloster N here runs a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It has 275 horsepower and normally 260 pound-feet of torque, although that jumps to 278 pound-feet of torque, again, with that NGS button for 20 seconds for that overboost to give you maximum acceleration. And then you just hear that glorious exhaust. I I love the way these things sound. I love the manual transmission version, and it sounds just as good here in the ECT. But yeah, so 0 to 60, Car Driver got 4.8 seconds. It was actually the fastest front-wheel drive vehicle they've ever tested. And previously, the manual transmission version would be about 5.2 seconds 0 to 60 that Car Driver got. We'll go ahead and do the manual shifting here, though, see how that does. There's a slight delay on the upshift. The 1-2 shift was like immediate, then the second to third, third to fourth were a little bit slower. Downshifts are immediate, and that's one thing I've noticed with other versions of this DCT. You know, the newest Kia Sorento and all those types of things. Downshifts are always very immediate and all those. Same deal here. You do hear a little bit of a whine from this transmission. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, I love that soundtrack. But we're cutting up some corners here. Let's see how the DCT version handles. Yeah, it's like it's on rails. You have this and corner carving electronic limit slip differential, and that does a really good job of putting the tire to the ground. I'm not really accelerating out of corners here. I'm just kind of coasting. But I love the crackles and pops. Brakes feel fantastic too. But I can tell that it's really wanting to spin those front tires still, even with the LSD and stuff. It is fighting for grip there, and it's great. But yeah, I mean, so brakes feel great. You know, obviously these larger brakes on the N version, and they have a little bit of a dead travel. It doesn't really start doing much until you're about a third of the way to the pedal, and then it starts really gripping on you there. But they're very immediate once you start getting onto them. And very, very good. And man, this thing, it's just so low and so sharp and so light feeling. I mean, this thing is a scalpel. I love the Veloster N. And so with the dual clutch version here, it did gain 96 pounds, and then I guess you saved, you know, almost 9 with these seats. So it would have been a little over 100 if you didn't swap the seats out. But you know, so even at 96 pounds heavier, you know, you're not going to really feel that because these are still so light. These weigh, even with the DCT, 3,186 pounds is what Car Driver got when they put it on their scales. So I mean, you're still looking at under 3,200 pounds, which is really rare in a vehicle these days, especially a vehicle that's practical at all. You know, and to have this much power, have the LSD, have, you know, all the stuff this has, to still be under 3,200 pounds is just so awesome. But yeah, and also in N mode, the steering is really, I love how heavy it gets. It's not like artificially heavy, it just feels really good. Anyway, I'm going to pop out of the manual mode here, go back into auto mode. I'm going to try doing a launch here if we can. Let's see how that does. Alright, so I activated the launch control. It lasts for 5 minutes, but you just come to a stop, mash both pedals. Says it's ready. There we go. Really well. It does a good job of, you know, limiting the traction. By the way, it was just set up for a 3,000 RPM launch. You can set that to a custom launch setting as, you know, as much as you want. Yeah, it works pretty well. I mean, you know, it's pretty quick. You know, we're still talking about, you know, roughly a 5 seconds 0 to 60. So I mean, it's nothing that's going to blow your mind or anything. But again, for a front-wheel drive thing like this, I really love this, and it's awesome that they're just offering this because, you know, like the Honda Civic Type R, you know, they don't give you any kind of automatic option. You're stuck with the manual, which is great if you're someone like me who loves a manual. But if you're not, you know, that's like, it immediately disqualifies stuff like the Type R. And so now I'm glad that you don't have to disqualify the Veloster N. This just opens up the appeal to way more people. And so another thing to comment on here, so you have the adaptive dampers here, and so they're up in their highest Sport Plus setting here in the N version, or the N mode. And you know, it's firm, but honestly this feels a little more forgiving than I remember it being in the manual transmission version. Yeah, it's not actually that bad. So I'm kind of surprised, because the one thing with these wheels and tires is, you know, it does do a really good job. I love also how immediate and direct the steering is. The steering is, it's so good. And every single thing about this car I love to death. This thing is, so good. Tighter corners here. See if this N track sense thing can do anything that I notice behind the wheel here. I know it's doing lots of stuff behind the scenes, but from the seat of the pants here, yeah, it feels just as good as it did with the manual mode. Oh, this thing, I mean, you can just demolish a backer in this thing. I love, even so that corner right there, it does provoke understeer sometimes in some cars. There's no such thing as understeer in the Veloster. It just does such a good job with that, ELSD and everything of just making this thing just be an absolute joy on back roads. Like, oh man. Yeah, this thing, it still is magical. It still is fantastic. And back when I reviewed the manual version, I said I would actually pick it over Honda Civic. I still stand by what I said back whenever I reviewed the manual Veloster. This is my favorite hot hatch. I would take this definitely over a GTI. I'd take it over the Civic Type R. Even though the Civic Type R has more horsepower, this is actually faster now in a straight line thanks to the automatic here. And I think it's just a combination of having the fantastic soundtrack, which you do not get at all in the Civic Type R. You get very little sound in that car, sadly. And I mean, the Civic Type R is so good with, its larger proportions, but the smaller size here in this makes it just that much more fun to chuck into a corner. I still think it's probably one of the best things you can get under, $35,000 all day long. I mean, there are some fun rear-wheel drive options, at that price point as well. But if you want something that's, got the most power possible for your money and still have fantastic handling, fantastic practicality, and just a car that'll just put a smile on your face on every single corner, every single time you have this active exhaust on, you do a shift. I mean, it's always just so much fun here in the Veloster. Alright, so now we're on the highway here in the Veloster N, and so I'm trying out some of these new safety features. So, blind spot monitoring, all that kind of stuff, everyone really knows about that stuff for the most part. But one interesting thing, so you don't have an adaptive cruise system, you do have regular cruise control, but it has the lane keeping assist, so it has like the steering for like an adaptive cruise system, but it doesn't have the actual speed changing capabilities of an adaptive cruise system. So it's kind of an interesting blend of some automation and some, just basic cruise control stuff here. So I have the steering assist on here currently, and it does do a pretty good job of staying within the lanes here. I can't judge it quite as harshly as the other systems since they don't actually call this highway driving assist like they do in the other Hyundai models. But it does do a pretty good job of, helping you steer a little bit. It will take some of the fatigue out of long highway drives if that's something you're looking for. It is nice that they have it now. It's punching it mid-corner with the wheel really turned a lot. It still does such a good job of putting the power down. Man, this thing, it's done such a good job in this. But anyway, thanks to Hyundai, I'm going to have the Veloster in here for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all over the place and have a very fun week, and then I'll come back to give you guys my final. Alright, so I've been driving the Veloster N DCT for a week now, and oh man, this thing is fantastic. I did notice though that, all the little toys you get here, I didn't really find myself using them a whole lot. I mean, I did use the manual shifting a good bit of the time. I love the custom mode. That's something you get with the manual too. But like the NGS mode of, the overboost thing, I never found myself like floored and being like, it's a fun toy. I just don't know. I mean, maybe I'd have to, live with one of these for longer than a week to really see how much I would use that. But, just in a week-long drive here, I didn't find myself being like, oh man, I'm so glad I have that NGS mode. But it is, again, just a fun little thing that they added. Other things, though, is that this dual-clutch transmission is really good. So the manual shifts and stuff aren't quick enough that it never annoyed me or anything. I still, depending on, sometimes it's a little bit quicker feeling than like Volkswagen's DSG and GTI. Other times it might feel a tiny bit slower. But honestly, I think this is fantastic, just as good as the DSG from Volkswagen. Honestly, the Volkswagen GTI's transmission every once in a while did let me down. You could kind of catch it off guard sometimes, in my opinion. Whereas this never really gets caught off guard. I really love just how snappy it is. And it actually does feel a good bit better than the upper manual Veloster N, and save myself $1,500. I'll get to pricing more in a minute, but that's just my personal preference because I'm a diehard manual lover. And I also believe that whenever companies offer manuals, we need to support them if you're someone who does enjoy a manual, because that sends the message to them to keep the manuals around. And if everyone just goes...
What do you get when you combine the BMW Z3 with a Mazda 6? You get the Ferrari FF. Seen here in this Hot Wheels version. What does FF stand for? Let me tell you, it stands for expletive. What were you thinking? This is the ugliest Ferrari that I've ever seen in my life. In fact, I've never dreamed a Ferrari could look this bad. How did they do it? They found a way. FF. Now, according to the packaging here, the FF stands for the Ferrari 4 4-wheel drive and 4 seats that cocoon the driver and occupants alike, and then swallow them and digest them over a period of thousands of years of pain and suffering. Because if you're seen in this thing, people will laugh at you. Like, if you can afford the real Ferrari FF, you could have afforded like a 360 or something. Why would you have this? You need 4-wheel drive. Buy an Audi. Why? What are you thinking? This was designed to tackle the toughest, most complex and ambitious driving challenges in luxurious driving style. If you show up in this car to a Ferrari event, you'll need it to run away from all of the other Ferrari drivers who attack you with flaming torches. Yes, it's the Pontiac Aztek of Ferraris. It's the FF. This horrible abomination is recreated faithfully in this Hot Wheels version. I know, it's like I don't like this car or something. Can you tell? It has a silver paint job that does nothing because the car is so ugly to begin with. The interior looks like a terrible company that made the 308, and the Testarossa did not make this. You don't buy a Ferrari because it's practical. You buy it because it looks nice, and it's fast and drives well. This lacks one of those things. By a lot. It's the Ferrari expletive Were You Thinking from Hot Wheels.
The Ukrainian government, which is determined to break it down, seeing it as pro-Russian. The Metropolitan himself, Metropolitan Pavel, was...
That's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
So setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice low slide. I think probably the first thing is, you have excellent visibility here in the Sonatas. You have, a nice thin A-pillar, nice little window there right by your side mirrors, which are off onto the doors. Very good view out, very easy to drive in that regard. One thing though that is interesting whenever you're first pulling out of even a parking lot is you'll notice this 8-speed wet dual clutch transmission. And it's just noticeable because you can always feel it engaging every once in a while. Whenever you're inching up, especially whenever you're reversing in parking lots, things like that, you will definitely notice that. So it's not going to be quite as smooth whenever you're doing those small little inching up maneuvers than something with a real torque converter automatic, which is basically all the competitors this competes with. But, once you're up and moving, it's not a big deal. And, it's still totally fine and smooth. And I'd say it's pretty refined still, too. So not a big deal. And in exchange for, the extra little bit of unrefinement, you are going to have quicker shifts than all the normal torque converter automatics and all the other competitors. So it just depends on whether you're okay with that trade-off. But other things I really love about the Sonata here are that you have really nice light steering. It's pretty just responsive still, but I just like that it's not overly heavy or trying to be too sporty or anything like that. But you can go up and put it into a sport mode if you want to have the steering be a little bit heavier, and we'll try out sport mode here in a minute. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and put it up into the Sport Plus mode. There's a regular sport mode too, but Sport Plus mode turns off trash control. The roads are a tiny bit damp, but let's turn on to this back road and see how it does. Jeez. It just wanted to do a rolling burnout there on me. But that's definitely the fun way to go, is to have traction control be off. Oh man, but wow, it's just hanging out at $4,000 here. It just wants to keep me in those upper RPMs. Interesting. So anyway, the Sonata N-Line here is a very punchy little car. It runs, again, that 2.5 liter Turbo 4. It does 290 horsepower, 311 pound-feet of torque. It'll do 0 to 60 time of 5 seconds flat, is what Car Driver got. But interestingly, that wasn't with the launch control this car does have. Instead, they did their own kind of launch, and were able to get a better time with the launch control. So if you're using launch control, maybe it'll be a low 5 second kind of time. But either way, it's very punchy, and honestly, the 0 to 60 time is going to be a little misleading because you're talking about a car that clearly can't put that power down super well, at least in these conditions. And so, you know, if you had better traction, you know, I think this would definitely be in the 4s for sure, because it feels very, very strong. So whenever you are, you know, doing those rolling accelerations, that's where you're really going to feel this thing. It's going to feel faster than a 5-second car, I think. And now we're on this little bit of a rougher road here, and it doesn't really have too much road noise, you know, just, you know, pretty refined for this segment of vehicle. I don't think it's the most refined in this segment, but certainly I think very good for the most part. Anyway, we're coming up some corners here. I always go around. Let's see how the Sonata N-Line handles. So, pretty good amount of grip here. It's a little bit snowy here. The roads are a little bit wet, so I'm not going to be able to push it quite as much as I usually would. But this thing still handles itself very well. So, you know, Sonatas already were pretty good handling for this generation, but of course here for the N-Line version, they did stiffen things up a little bit. So you have firmer dampers now, you have thicker anti-roll bars, and you also have these Pirelli, these are the P0 all-season tires. You can, again, get summer tires as an option for just $200. I believe they're Continentals. But these Pirelli all-seasons are still 245 wide, you know, 19-inch wheels, and so it's very flat. There's really no body roll or anything, and feels pretty good here. But one thing you will notice is that you do not have a limited slip differential here, and that is really the downfall of most of the vehicles in this segment. Is, you know, they definitely want to spin the tires on corner exit, and especially without traction control on and stuff on this one, you know, it's going to be very eager to do that. So you get a little bit of torque steer. Now, is it terrible? No. Honestly, I think torque steer is kind of fun these days, and I think it kind of livens up an experience that otherwise would be a little bit more dead and subdued. So, you know, it's not sloppy in my experience here so far. I will continue to play around with it. Now, obviously, if you do, you know, give it too much power coming out of a corner or something, you know, that will cause it to understeer, because you'll just have the torque steer and just wheel spin going off into oblivion. So you have to be smart about it. It's not going to put down power as well as some of the best front-wheel drive sporty stuff like a Civic Type R, or even a Civic Si, honestly, which has, you know, the better, you know, limited slip diff up front, which really helps with front traction. It's also worth noting that not having a limited slip diff also opens you up to having suboptimal winter performance, you know, because if it's this eager to spin the tires when the road's just a little bit damp, you know, whenever the roads are really wet or snowy, you're definitely going to want to have snow tires that at least give you a fighting chance, because otherwise, I mean, this thing is just going to be spinning all over the place. But it handles itself very well. Now, trying to compare it to all the other competitors, I think that you have a little bit of a lower sitting position in the Accord. The Accord feels a little more athletic and a little bit lighter. The Accord is about 100 pounds lighter than this, by the way. These weigh about 3,541 pounds, and the Accords are in the 3,400 range with the 2.0 turbo versions of those. Camry, though, is about the same weight as this for a Camry TRD. That has a V6, so a little bit of a bigger engine and stuff. And I'll say that the Camry TRD, I think, has a little bit of a stiffer suspension setup, so that felt even maybe a little bit more eager to dive into corners than this does. So I don't think this is the best in the handling department as far as those go. Mazda 6 2.5T, it's been a few years since I reviewed one of those. That's a little on the softer side, so if you want a bunch of power and you want probably the smoothest ride possible, I'd say go for the Mazda. This and the Kia K5 GT are very similar, just from my recollection here. I drove the K5 GT a little under a year ago, and that also handled very, very good. The same kind of deal where, you know, you're wanting for some more traction, but otherwise, you know, they're very good. Here we go. Alright, so it starts that wheel spin and then cuts back, and yeah, but, you know, I think actually, you know, if you want a more composed setup, you know, clearly doing that's going to be the better way to go, but it's not as much fun. But if you're trying to preserve your tires, you still get plenty of forward thrust here with it just in the regular sport mode here. Also, I gotta say, the steering is a nice bit weightier here in the sport mode. Throttle response is also, you know, a little bit more responsive here and feels good. Now, there's also a custom mode, by the way. That custom mode will allow you to individually toggle the steering, the powertrain, and the ESC, so you can have all three of those in a separate, different setting if you'd like. Also, one last thing to mention about the handling here is that you have bigger brakes here on the N-Line version of the Sonata. So they're 13.6-inch rotors in the front now and 12.8-inch rotors in the rear. So beefed up all around, and haven't had any complaints with the braking so far. I'll continue to play around with that and see. But just like this engine though, this whole car feels very eager. Oh man, yeah, this front end will definitely slide around on you though, for sure. You have to be smart about how you deploy the power in this thing. But I think that just adds to the fun experience here that's not an N-Line, so I don't think it's really bad. It also has a good little sound whenever you're getting on it. So there is like an active sound enhancement. You can toggle, there's like 4 different settings as far as how loud or how quiet you want, or you can have it off completely. I have it on the loudest setting currently. So that might be adding a little bit more muscularity to the sounds you're hearing here. But I'm all for these sounds, I mean, I think it just adds again to the fun experience here of this car. And especially since considering there is no loud exhaust or any kind of induction note or anything really, I kind of welcome the assistance from the speakers there a tiny bit. But it's a fun thing to drive though. With these seats gripping you in nice and tight, I mean, it still feels like you can just really, carve up a back road pretty good. Also, we have the paddle shifters here. There's their dedicated manual mode. But you just start pulling the paddles and it immediately starts shifting on you here. Wow, this thing, yeah. Wow, yeah, it's struggling to put the power down, but oh, it's so fun. But pretty quick downshifts. Yeah, this is definitely, the shifts are much better than what you're going to be getting with all the competitors, again, outside of the K5 GT, which uses the same transmission. But yeah, upshifts, this transmission is interesting though, because the upshifts are definitely slower than the downshifts by a little bit. I'm not sure why. Typically, you're looking for the other way around. But overall, both for upshifts and downshifts, they're quicker than all the torque converter automatics and all the competitors. So I'll take it. And yeah, I think it's a really good transmission again, as long as you're okay giving up a little bit of smoothness at those low speeds. And now just hitting some potholes and a little bit of a bumpier road here. You feel that it's, a tiny bit firmer than a Sonata, because the Sonatas are pretty nice and comfortable generally. And so here with this, you feel the bumps a little bit more, but it is still very comfortable, very family friendly here with the ride and everything. No complaints whatsoever with the ride, even with these front wheel drivers. And now we're out on the highway here in the Sonata N-Line, and I have the Highway Drive Assist system on. Although this doesn't seem to be quite as advanced as the other Highway Drive Assist systems in other Sonatas, because this system, it's still doing the lane keeping assist and the steering assist for me, and has the adaptive cruise and all that here in the N-Line version. But it doesn't actually tell me that it's Highway Drive Assist, so I'm not sure if there's a slight little differentiation there. But regardless, it's been doing the steering here fairly well, but the Hyundai system still really struggles, at least in my area, to keep track of the road lines. And so there was one time going around a little corner there where the light just turned off. And the Hyundai system is one of the worst, where it won't actually give you a good notification that it quit tracking the road lines and it quit giving you that assist. So like you just have this little green icon here in the top of the gauge cluster here, and that is your only indication that's giving you any kind of steering assist. Whenever that quits illuminating, then it just gives up on you. So you always have to be on your toes with this system. There's other systems like Subaru's system, for example, that once it quits tracking the road lines, it will beep at you to let you know that that's the case, and so you're actually aware of what's going on. This doesn't have any kind of warning like that, so with this system, you really just have to always be babysitting it. Unfortunately, I don't love this Highway Drive Assist system. It also let me down in past Sonatas where it just would straight up go over the road lines and not hold the lane. The Kia K5 GT was the same thing, unfortunately. But otherwise, all the other, adaptive cruise control stuff works really well. It's also worth noting, though, like, you don't have all the safety tech you can get in Sonatas. So, like, you don't have the blind view monitor here where, you have a little picture of your blind spot when you turn and turn.
Now that's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
So setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice slow seat. There's a lot to take in here. because it's so much different than even some other electric cars that I reviewed. So first thing, you do have a nice high seating position. It's a lot higher than, again, a normal hatchback or something, which is deceptive to alert people around you that you're driving. And so whenever you're rolling around at low speeds, it all feels very futuristic. Another thing that really stood out at me immediately is it has this enormous augmented head-up display. It's honestly, I think, probably the largest head-up display I've ever used, and I think it's definitely one of the biggest ones out there, if not the biggest. And so it's very, very cool with what it can, kind of project onto the road there as far as navigation instructions. But typically when you're not running nav, all you're going to be seeing is the speed limit, and then also any kind of safety stuff for blind spot monitoring and, lane keep, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and so right now I have it in the level 1 regen mode. So you have 3 levels of regen, and then there's I-pedal mode, which is a one-pedal driving type of thing where, it will come to a full stop just by taking your foot off of the gas pedal. And so it's nice depending on, what you want to do. You also do have paddle shifters here to change the regen on the fly, which is a really nice thing because that's something that a lot of other electric vehicles don't have. I really loved it actually in the Kia Niro EV I reviewed a couple of years ago, but stuff like the Mustang Mach-E and the Volkswagen ID4 don't have those. And so if you're an average, and let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. And here we go. Wow, I kicked in fast. Wow, okay. Whew, that is quick. That feels faster than the numbers suggest. So, this is the dual motor all-wheel drive version of the Ioniq 5 here. And so, this one does 320 horsepower, 446 pound-feet of torque. So, they're only claiming a 4.9 second 0 to 60 time, but I don't know. By the seat of my pants, that felt closer to like a mid to low 4-second time in my opinion. That was very, very punchy. I am impressed. Wow, and yeah, sport mode really doesn't waste any time. I mean, you tip into that gas there and it really takes off. And I don't know if you can hear, but there's this very quiet little electric motor, like whirring sound that you hear, and man, whew, this thing is quick. I've driven plenty of electric cars already, so it's not just the instant power, but this feels faster than those numbers suggest. This actually does feel, I think, a tiny bit faster than the Mustang Mach-E in its premium all-wheel drive version, even though that has a very similar, I think it's a 5.2 second 0 to 60, so it is slightly slower by the numbers. The Mach-E, by the way, does have very similar torque figures, but it does have a decent bit less horsepower, unless you go up to the GT versions, that is. But yeah, very, very impressive. Now, this is the top version of the Ioniq 5, so that means that it has 256 miles of range from a 77 kilowatt hour battery, and that's the gross rating. They haven't said what the actual usable rating is, so, but it's probably somewhere around 70, kilowatt hours or so. Now, you can get a smaller battery version that's coming a little bit later, just a few months down the road, and that one also does way less horsepower. It's like 168 horsepower or something, but the other, like rear-wheel drive versions that do still run this larger battery, those will do 303 miles of range, but you do give up 100 horsepower or so and about 200 pound-feet of torque, so they're not quite as quick. Anyway, we're cutting some corners here, and let's see how the Ioniq 5 handles them. Wow, very flat neutral handling. I mean, electric cars usually have pretty flat handling, but this feels much more eager than I was expecting. Steering also feels pretty responsive. It might be a tiny bit slower than a Mach-E, just from my memory of the Mach-E, but this, wow, this really handles good. And one thing this definitely does have over the Mach-E is grip. So this thing is running these 20-inch wheels, but they're 255 wide Michelin Primacy all-season tires. So these tires being 255 wide, that is a huge distinction, because like the Mach-E only runs like 225 wide tires. And I did notice that the Mach-E, in addition to being several hundred pounds heavier, had those skinnier tires, and so front end grip definitely wasn't the best, and it definitely didn't handle as confidently as this does. Now, the Mach-E had a little more tail happiness to it, kind of gave it, I think what they're trying to do is more of a Mustang type vibe with that Mach-E, but this, it just grips and goes, and good grief, this thing is, you could really tear up a back road in this thing, like full out assault, and even though this thing weighs over 4,600 pounds, you wouldn't really notice it, because man, oh man, this thing, it is really a good handler. I am blown away. I mean, I was expecting it to be a little bit better than the Mach-E just based on the tires, but this is a good bit better. And, oh man, this thing is fun to throw around corners. And it does not feel 4,600 pounds either. It feels, I would say that it actually feels, you know, around 4,000 pounds to me, just again, seat of the pants kind of feeling, just by the way they disguise the weight. I think part of that also goes down to this longer wheelbase. And so it's going to really give you this very stable, planted ride. It also gives you a really smooth ride. And even on these 20-inch wheels, which don't have much sidewall on them, it is really doing a good job of soaking up bumps and just feels very comfortable, honestly. I haven't had any complaints with ride and stuff. We'll go over some potholes here in a few minutes, but just as it is, it's just really a nice thing to just roll around. It feels like you're just like gliding over the pavement, but yet you have this incredible grip. It's really a wonderful best of both worlds scenario. But even if we want to play around with the other drive modes, so there's Eco mode, and that will really dull throttle response. So if you're someone who doesn't want to feel like this thing's like trying to take off on you at every possible second, Eco mode, you know, handling is hands down better than a regular Mach-E. For sure. I still have not driven a Mach-E GT, so I can't say how it compares to that, which does have wider tires, thankfully. But this is much...
Recognize the admission of Finland and Sweden to NATO, because we all know that, looking from an historical perspective, NATO members have brought the national issues to the...
New for the 2011 series of Hot Wheels, it's the Lamborghini Aventador. You know why I like this Lamborghini? Because I can actually pronounce it. Well, that, and it also looks amazing. This is one of their best designs in years. It's extremely low to the ground. I can't imagine actually driving this thing. All that power behind you and probably no visibility whatsoever. Well, you don't have to worry about such things or the high price tag with this Hot Wheels version. It just looks great. And I'm sure they're going to release this car with 50 different colors and paint jobs and liveries over the next few years, as well they should. But here's the orange one with a hint of black around those vents, which are just designed to suck in small animals and apply them to the brakes, I think. Cooling the brakes with animal power. This one has a grayish interior and black wheels, which make it look even cooler. It looks really badass with those black wheels, and bright orange paint job look nice. According to the packaging, this is named for a trophy-winning bull and uses F1 style suspension and carbon fiber. It's fast, rare, and screams luxury. This Hot Wheels version is neither fast nor rare, and it doesn't really scream luxury, but it does scream Lamborghini, which screams all of those other things. It's a really nice collectible car. The Lamborghini Aventador from Hot Wheels. Gotta put this thing up against an El Camino and see who wins. You already know the answer to that.
Taken to a hearing, arrested by the Ukrainian security services, taken to a hearing.
Platform of the alliance whenever any particular topic came to the agenda.
Let's to thank one of our sponsors, Farmers Insurance.
Somebody needs saving. Don't worry, citizen. I'm here to save.
Already saved.
Today?
Switched him to Farmers so he could save an average of $441 on his auto insurance.
Okay. I guess I'll go save the world or whatever.
If you need saving, get a quote from Farmers.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.